man. We've been trying to get this together for a little while, man.
Yeah, well, my name is Boderick, Duke alum, and I've been in the Triangle for about 14 years now. And I'm a marketing exec, run a marketing company. But a lot of my efforts are focused in the African American community, and as Richard mentioned, just mentioning us and enlightening people about all the positive things we do, mentoring, and so in different roles I'm involved in the African American community. Also very involved with the Black Chamber of Commerce, helping businesses get started within our community, helping businesses come together, to really work together for bigger purposes.
Yeah, so that those are really, really important. So there's a stereotype that black folks can't work together, right? There's the stereotypes that we are not good at business as well. And so, it sounds like that you really are trying to combat or try, not necessarily deal with the stereotypes, but, be on the ground, figure out how to do it, and to say, hey, it has been done, it is going to be done, and this is what it looks like. Talk about what was your interest, and I hate you had to bring up that other institution, but talk about that other institution that you graduated from and what drew you into this marketing piece.
Okay. Well, I went to a high school that was very, very mixed as well. So I went to high school in Delaware, and I think African American population in my town, maybe about 30%. And so our school reflected that, and graduated with honors and played basketball, soccer, was in student government, and so on and so forth. They did it all in high school, and when I came to Duke to visit, it reminded me of that same thing. The academic excellence, the athletic excellence. I thought immediately, man, this is kind of reminiscent of high school. I thought I could grow well there, and yeah, so went there, majored in mechanical engineering, and during my senior year, I started working on some community projects and figuring out how communities are built, and I started a company there, and that company was a website company, and that kind of propelled me into marketing, trying to figure out how things work and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
you went to Duke. You actually majored in engineering, not into marketing. But that right there at the end, we get to those moments in our life and we say, "Yo, this is what I'm really, really interested in." Mm-hmm. I mean, what did your folks say, or what did people say when you said you were gonna? I would assume do like a 360 on what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I still practice a little bit as an engineer, but my folks have always been supportive no matter what. You know what I mean? And when I was a junior or senior in college, I started reading a lot of entrepreneurship books, and reading up from Rich Dad Poor Dad to Think and Grow Rich to Ink and Grow Rich, and I think those books really inspired how I thought, and I talked to my dad about it a lot, and I realized that in defining wealth for me, it was having an adequate amount of time as well as having an adequate amount of money. And that, to me, that's what wealth was. And I knew that as an engineer, I could be successful, but I also thought that as I developed my passion, that would be more important at that time. So I wanted to spend more time in those early years, 21, 22, developing and chasing my passion, which is growing to be connecting people. So.
Okay, so now you graduated from Duke. You've kind of started. This is during the time when .com was hot. There's a lot of companies that are trying to plant their fat flag in this virtual space and try to get to that IPO stage. Did you find that there were some barriers? Had you started to get to the space where the company that you were really focused on was kind of really thinking about or putting African Americans as part of its wheelhouse, or was it just kind of a marketing connection of different people in general?
Well, interestingly enough, when I started my marketing company, I was a senior in college, and I was like, well, I need to. So I read a book and it said, well, start a company, just become an entrepreneur today. And I said, well, what can I do? I said, well, I'm in college. I'm not going to start a lawnmower company. I need to do something where I can put a little bit of time towards it and help people do something where can I have a competitive advantage? And I had learned how to build a website in one of my classes. So I said, man, this is something that's new. A lot of people want it, but they don't know how to do it. And so I started a website company, and so as I started to say, where my clients going to come from, I started looking at the community and saying, okay, well, and very early on I started saying, okay, well, who's going to give me? At first I was broadly advertising different companies, and then it seemed like the only ones I felt comfortable presenting in front of were people that looked like me, and the only ones that really would give me a chance were people that look like me. So I said, man, like, I got to find more black businesses out there. It seems like they're the only ones that are going to give me. They're trying to even give me a chance to do this. So,
as a obviously a very young person,
right.
Neophyte in this whole arena. So you felt that level of comfort with black businesses. Talk about one of the first one or two businesses that said, I'm gonna give you a shot, and we're gonna kind of roll.
Yeah, interesting enough, and so I think two companies, right? There's a company called Thompson Construction, Donnell Thompson and Company, and Donnell Thompson played football at UNC back in the days, and he has a construction company. And he was building a lot, and with my engineering background, I understood, builders, contractors. So I approached this company and said, hey, this is what I can do. They've been planning to get on the web for a while. They just didn't have anybody to do it, and so on and so forth. And and I approached a lot of other companies too that were not black owned, but they were like, hey, we'll give you a shot, And so that was one company. And another company, Henry Richardson and Company. Henry Richardson actually became a mentor of mine, and he said, hey, young blood, we'll give you a shot, But I don't want you to just do this website. Got some other research I want you to take a look at too. So then I started doing some research for him, building a website, and he became a mentor of mine. And those are two companies that very early on, when I barely knew, what it meant to have a business, we're like, hey, we'll give you a shot, we know you can deliver what you say you can deliver. So.
I know Henry Richardson well, and that sounds like him to this day. He's interested in growing businesses. He's interested in giving a hand up to those folks who show that they have some aptitude, have some interest, and have the willingness to do that work. So that story rings very much true to me. So you have a couple of people now. You have a couple of feathers that you can put in your hat. And you can go out there. Talk about what some of the struggles were to actually grow this thing and make it a viable business. Figuring out what that business model is, and maybe we should take a step back. I believe there are many businesses that are still struggling, really trying to understand what their business model is. And there are a multitude of different business models that you can either choose from or stumble into. But talk about what that process for you has been.
Man, it's tricky, because everybody thinks entrepreneurship is just like, okay, well, I'm doing this one thing and I can do it well, so why don't I do it for myself, But as I read often and experienced often, it's much, much more difficult than that. From the marketing side of things to the finance side of things, to the operations side of things, there are challenges all over the place. And I think that most entrepreneurs don't really understand that. But a lot of the challenges I think come in developing, like as you mentioned, developing your business plan and figuring out what you do and how you do it well and what your margins are and how you need to be. How proficient you need to be in order to make a profit, but I do want to mention that as I started doing my research, I quickly realized how communities are formed, and I started to say, okay, well, why is Durham as such? Why is Chapel Hill as such? What's in Carver? What makes a community? And I think over the years I've been able to figure out. From the infrastructure level all the way up, how communities are formed, and I became very disturbed about our lack of presence in certain communities and how we're represented in communities, and that over time has propelled me to do more with our community as far as representation and just building things, African American things in our community.
Understood, and I'm getting to this point where I'm starting to think about it as understanding the market, where with it's not that you don't have a lot of information. The information is there, but it's number one how you organize it. Primarily how you organize it in your head, but even not just how you organize it, but then after you start to organize it, how you actually bring in, say, okay, I got this piece, I got this piece of the pie. I need to figure out this piece right here. And then all those three, when they start to connect, all of a sudden you can start to describe, you can start to predict. There are other factors, other folk who have gotten to that space. And because of that ability to not just understand, but then to predict, they're able to position their companies, they're able to position even, my econ background says that, there's not necessarily, I don't believe in the scarcity model. I don't believe that UNC, well, I do believe UNC and Duke are, in competition in multiple ways. But I don't believe necessarily that Chapel Hill, that Durham, that Raleigh, Greensboro, et cetera, are necessarily in competition directly. But there are those who believe that. And so they're vying for, well, we want this business, right? This business said they're coming to North Carolina and they got to figure out where they're going to go. I don't necessarily believe that that's the only way, let's put it this way, that's the only way to look at these types of problems. And it's in that, so it's in deciding how you're going to outlook on how you're going to look at the world, and how you're going to create your business model is really going to lay out how successful you can be.
Definitely.
I say that, and I think that sometimes when you come from a scarcity model, sometimes it's much more black and white, and so some people find that it's easier to say, well, I'm going to make money doing this. I'm still railing against that. And I don't think that's the correct way to grow a business.
I agree.
That's a personal I see folks who have that model and go out here and step on some other folks and make money, but I don't believe that's the best way to do it.
I completely agree with that. I think that it boils down to a lot of different things. With an entrepreneur, their background, how they're raised, and what their goals are. I think for me early on, as an entrepreneur, I defined for me what wealth was, and for me it always was a healthy amount of time and a healthy amount of money. I was raised to understand that money is not everything, and there are all people that have more than you and less than you. Be comfortable, grow accordingly, and that's stuck with me. So I think as a young entrepreneur, I learned very, very early on that it's a sacrifice. So I've always been very, very careful with a lot of my companies, and when I have been, it's proven that it hasn't been for me.
Understood.
That you have to grow accordingly. You try to grow too fast, it gets you.
Right. And you start to cut corners, or you start to find yourself in situations where it doesn't align. So one of the other things and you've mentioned this idea of the business plan. This business plan is something that's living and breathing, and I think it really does start to connect. A great business plan really does start to connect with your values, and so that means that you got to be clear about what those are, and you got to infuse those into the business plan. You and I could sit here right now and come up with 3 or 4 different ways to make money. But just because those are the ways in which you could make money doesn't mean that it's how you need to do it.
Exactly.
It doesn't necessarily line up with where you are on a value direction. So talk about one of those situations where you said, I could do something different or do it differently, but I think that as I start to reevaluate my business plan, reevaluate my values, maybe I need to, think about it.
Yeah, man, it's almost on a daily basis. You know what I mean? Where I have to make those decisions. But the thing for me, based on my training, education, and so on and so forth, for me, I look at business and coming up with a product as it's very, very simple for me. It's problem solving. So I find a problem and I